tourism market, which target we're going to focus on, when do we expect to open up and whatnot. So we'll just go ahead, Priscilla, if you have any opening statement, the floor is yours at this moment, please. And members, Priscilla Iakopo serves as the executive director. That's correct?
Managing Director.
Managing Director, I apologize. Managing Director for MVA. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chairman Blanco and members of the House. On behalf of the Marianas Visitors Authority Board of Directors and staff, we are here seeking your support for MVA's fiscal year 2021 budget. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our tourism industry has come to a halt. The MVA relies on hotel occupancy tax as our main source of funding. As we go through the COVID-19 pandemic, the Marianas Visitors Authority continues to monitor its source markets to get up-to-date information on travel developments, and at the same time come up with recovery plans for marketing abroad and enhancing our destination. There have been no tourists as the international airlines have suspended flights into the Marianas. Therefore, there are no tourists staying in our hotels, which equates to zero amount in hotel occupancy tax to collect. The MVA has already reduced from 40 hours weekly to 32 hours, ceased and suspended services, and reduced contracts. Further, if our finances do not improve, we may have to look into additional furloughs and terminations of those that we have retained. Therefore, we ask for your guidance and continued support as we continue to remain resilient and to share with everyone our natural beauty, friendly people, and rich in culture and history, which is what makes us a pristine destination. The budget presented in front of you all is not an expenditure. Rather, it's an investment, as it drives in revenue to our economy and provides jobs for our people. Thank you, Situs Masi Gliso.
Thank you very much, Managing Director Iakopo. We have the Secretary of Finance with us today. I welcome his comments. If you have any opening statements on the proposal from the administration of 4.7 million.
I am here to share with the committee our revenue projections for the hotel occupancy tax for FY 2021, and I'm here to support MVA in their budget proposal. Thank you.
I think we can go ahead and open up for questions if any other members want to go straight in, dive straight in. Questions? Perhaps, Secretary, can just walk us through the difference of $5.8 million difference between the proposal from MVA and the proposal from the administration? Well, just walk us through what the discrepancy is and why and how.
I apologize upfront that I have not been briefed of the submission of MVA. I was asked to sit in for our OMB special assistant, mainly because their MVA's budget is not part of the general fund, so to speak. It's derived strictly with hotel occupancy tax. And our projections obviously is not the rosiest. We did project $5.9 million for hotel occupancy tax for the coming fiscal year. We based our projections on 2011 levels of tourism and the collections at that time. The reason we went back is we went back to the days before we had the industry of the casino and when we were just rebuilding our economy. Looking at the current state of, due to COVID and the no flights coming in, that produces hotel occupancy tax with our visitors, where I believe the latest I've heard we're in a single-digit occupancy, And so we expect that through September. But the new fiscal year is a little different, so we're projecting um, around, we're going back to the numbers of around 340,000 visitors visiting the Commonwealth. And as a precautionary measure to not knowing where we're at with COVID-19 and the effects that could happen, and without a vaccine or any indicators showing any difference in tourist arrivals. I may have, that's just based on looking at the figures. MVA would probably have a better projection and a more aggressive marketing plan that supports their budget requests and their blessings from this body. So we're looking at 5.9. 80% of that goes to MVA, about 4.7 million, as you saw in your packet. Please note that the government still owes MVA for hotel occupancy tax from last fiscal year and current fiscal year. The total resources they have available for their budget, or for based on what we're expecting to transfer to MVA, and we transfer based on cash availability. We have a total of about $13.4 million available for MVA. Coming from my office, we are still committed and dedicated to ensuring that MVA gets their fair share, or their right share of the hotel occupancy tax. So we're still committed to doing that. So therefore, the difference between their proposal and what they have lined up for the new fiscal year and their approaches in restarting our economy with visitors coming into our islands, the central government, the executive branch is in support of the resources that they're needing, and we'll be making sure that we provide them with those dollars that is due to them. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Just to reiterate real quick, the 5.9 mil was based on numbers from 2011. That's very helpful. At least we know where the estimates came from, and that 80% of it, or 4.7 mil, is what the administration is proposing for MVA. Any questions, members? Floor Leader Sablan?
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, MVA, Managing Director, and your team. Just a follow-up question to the Secretary. With regards to the 13 million that was still out from last fiscal year and this present fiscal year to MVA, can you expound where did this 13, when you guys used this 13 million, where was it used for when you guys borrowed or used up the funding from MVA?
Oh, you mean current situation and the availability of cash? Yes, so the government collected, last fiscal year, we were short $5.6 million. That's still in the books due to MVA, so due to MVA. The current year payables is 9.1 million. 7.3 is due to MVA. We've transferred 4.3 million of that, and so still remaining for the rest of the fiscal year is $3 million. To answer your question, Floor Leader, is the way we operate at finance is, everything is collected, and then after about 2 to 3 weeks after the month, we analyze the total revenues by type of revenue. But in the meantime, when resources are collected, we have a schedule of payments or obligations that we pay, and we just kind of pay as we see available to whatever is what we needed to pay at that time. I do communicate with the managing director when she is in need of funds, and she's not shy to call me up, and we do our best to give her what she's asking for as we continue going through the fiscal year. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Chair. I'll yield for now.
Thank you, Floor Leader Sablan. Next, Member Rep Lipan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Secretary, Director. It's good to see you and your staff. Mr. Secretary, I'm looking at this proposal and I'm kind of confused. Are we budgeting MVA or is this coming from the HUD money? Because actually, every fiscal year, the HUD money belongs to MVA, 80% of that. And I'm seeing a budget proposal from the governor. How's that? We're budgeting MVA when you're mentioning that you still owe 13.4 million. I don't understand that by law, all the HUD, the 80% is supposed to be transferred to MVA, and now we're seeing a budget proposal 4.7 million. Can you explain to me how's this? Because I am lost.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we are proposing a revenue of $4.7 million for the new fiscal year. That is just being conservative with the figures that we have with us to date. I do know that they're submitting a $9 million budget. I'm sharing with this body that the total resources available to MVA is for 2021 is 13.4 million because we do have a payable. We still owe them money. Our debt to MVA is not included as a resource for the fiscal year. It's resources that is still due to. And so that's the challenge I have, is to ensure and make sure that we give them the resources that they're requesting for, which was been submitted by the Budget Office.
Yeah, but Secretary, that is not what I'm trying to hear from you. I mean, they're still owed money, and we're looking at 2021. I don't understand that we are going to allot them this $4.7 million when in actuality they have more money than any other entity, and it just don't make sense that you're going to be budgeting MVA. What I'm trying to hear from you is, are they going to be receiving this money before the end of this fiscal year, or are they going to be receiving this money, what's owed MVA, the next fiscal year? Would this number change? That's what I wanted to hear.
No, we are transferring money to MVA currently still. I'm working on a transfer this week for them. The last transfer was 3 weeks ago, about 500,000, right?
No.
300? 300,000. To answer your question, this number will go down based on what we transfer this year. We're expecting to transfer at least by the end of the fiscal year this 3.008 in our current payables to the Marianas Visitors Authority. To answer your question, going back to what you're mentioning, I'm showing a projection of $4.7 million from HOT. That is not what will be allotted to MVA. Should the budget for MVA is $9 million and is passed, we will allot based on the $9 million, and others. Then there will be other sources of funds to make up for that budget in our balanced budget proposal.
So you're alluding to that this is the proposed. So let's say 2021 comes in and signed to law. This proposal would would this be supersede with what is owed? Meaning, let's say down the line you find X amount of $1 million and say now's the time to transfer to MVA. Would this number change?
We will transfer based on what's due to MVA. It will change what I'm sharing with the body is $13.4 million is available budgetary resources due to MVA for this fiscal year, last fiscal year, and our projected 2021. And so, should we come up with some resources, we could already be transferring. Right now, I'm showing $8.7 million payable to MVA to date as of June 30. And so, the additional $5 million in resource, or $4.7 million, makes up the $13.4 million.
Okay, from the cutoff date of when the governor exercises his authority and issued the EEO, from that date to now, what was the collection of the HUD money?
The collection was 9.1 million. The 80% of that is 7.3 million. We've already, out of the 7.3, we've already transferred 4.3.
And
what's payable left is 3 million for this fiscal year, and we still have 5.6 million from last fiscal year payable to MVA.
so my other question is, with the current facility, the alternate care facility that FEMA is paying in, is there HUD money in that aspect? Because it's a hotel.
The facility is not, but the contract that we signed for Canoa and PIC included a 15%, I don't want to say padding, but we included 15% within the total contract as equivalent to a hot tax. So when that's received, that will be recorded as such.
So with that 15%, has FEMA paid up that 15%?
No, not yet.
So in the event FEMA does pay that up, would that be transferred to MVA?
That will be transferred, that will be booked as a hotel occupancy tax, that's correct.
So that's for that fiscal year, right?
For this fiscal year, yeah.
For this fiscal year?
Yeah.
So the projected was $13.4 million, correct? For this fiscal year?
No. Oh, this fiscal year, our projection, I don't have what our projection was. I just have the actuals. But the actuals collected to date is 9.1 million. I think I can try to pull it up.
Well, I wanted to make sure because MVA had furlough about, what, 80% of your staff, Director?
We furloughed 23 staff out of 34.
Out of 34? 23?
Yes,
So you have 11?
11.
So what is the probability of bringing them back in if we're knowing that we're not seeing any time sooner opening up internationally because of this pandemic? And I know that you're in the preparedness model right now for if we do open up. Would the 11 suffice at the request of the governor to start making preparedness?
So with the 11 staff that we currently have, we have one for Tinian and one for Rhoda. To answer your question, no, we don't have enough staff. We would need to bring our staff back in order to provide 100% full marketing and promotional programs.
It does not make sense that out of all the agency, I always figured that MVA would have a residue of money, but now I know that you have exhausted all those hidden funds before, as we discussed in the past. Secretary had mentioned, that he's timely transferring funds, but I see that MVA is still hampered with the ability to move forward with the promotional aspect. And even with that, we don't foresee any success as we go down the line with it. We don't definitely know when it's going to open. Don't understand that the projection that is being shared right now does not satisfy the needs of MVA. I think that, with this calamity, everybody is bleeding for money. And, your projection, your budget submission will not just justify why we should continue making promotion, because even other destinations are trying the best to promote, but it's difficult. But anyways, looking at your budget proposal, there's some concern that I have, Director. You have down here a joint promotion. Can you elaborate? What is a joint promotion? What is this about?
So the joint promotion is due to Skymark Airlines. This was part of the promotion program that we had with them when we partnered to bring back a Japan airline.
So, in the event Skymark does return to flying to Saipan, this 627,000 as projected or proposed by the administration, this would assist Skymark with the promotion aspect?
So the way the incentive program works is that Skymark would have to fly at least 21 or 23 days in order for them to receive the incentive. And should they not fulfill that, then we will not remit that payment to them.
Is it proportionate, or
It's on a monthly basis.
what's the number? Are you talking
So if I'm not mistaken, for the first year, it's 150,000 each month. And then the year after that is reduced by 25,000. And a year after that, it's another 25.
So do we have a definite date that Skymark is planning to fly in?
Unfortunately not. They actually did announce a couple of weeks ago that they have suspended to the end of September.
So let's say that it does not fly in, would this amount can facilitate for your office to bring back those that were furloughed until such time, because seeing that finance is capable to continue remitting to MVA previous HUD money, I think in fairness of your staff and preparedness to promote, I think this money should go directly to personnel for now and be utilized so you can bring those personnel back in so they can help you assist, develop what plans for the promotional aspect. But for now, there's no definite and tentative date that Skymark will be flying in. I think this is about the time that you start tweaking your numbers, because if we want to promote the CNMI, you need the additional staff, as you mentioned, and it's not right just to get this money and let it sit there while waiting for Sky Mart. I highly recommend that you restructure some of this advertising, event, and marketing fees to go to personnel so we can prepare for opening. We don't know when, but you know, the governor had mentioned that we should start, and even the task force or the council that was created are preparing itself for this. And I highly recommend that for now this joint promotion should be shelved because we don't know. The other concern I have that was brought up this morning during the mayor's office is the Public Law 20-17, that 2% for enhancement on the respective senatorial district. Have they gotten their allocation?
No, not in the recent months.
Has any of the senatorial district received their allocation?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is Tinian. The last remittance was December of last year.
Has the third senatorial received any of that money?
So let me just go back. So the last remittances that we have for Mayor of Saipan was for 19,000, and then for Tinian, a total of 59,000, for Rhoda, a total of 19,000. So to date, we do all three of them 1.3 million.
There you go, Secretary. This 1.3, you know, we're gonna continue hearing from the respective senatorial mayor about their budget requests, and I think that, you know, some of this money could be diverted to their needs to assist in preparedness. But again, I hope that MVA can equate as they receive their allocation of previous HUD money, that you provide some sort of assistance to the respective senatorial district mayor's office so they can move forward with their project as they see fitting and needing. I know that 2.5 of this is going to Department of Finance, as created by Public Law 18-1. I think the Secretary can say, I don't need that money, and share it with the other agency. I think right now we need to all work together and figure out how to turn this economy around, find solution. As MVA is a big factor of this because tourism is our only industry. We're seeing the domino effect of this right now. We don't know how many more businesses are going to shut down. And if we don't open up, we will continue to see the trend fall, and domestically, we will not be able to sustain ourselves. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rep. Ripon. Rep. Yumo, please.
Good afternoon, Director. The projection for the arrivals at 268,000 tourists for next fiscal year. When we look at the occupancy rate, we're looking at half of the arrivals, but then the the projection for 2021 didn't fall by close to half. So is that an accurate figure that you are proposing at for the $10.3 million projection of hotel tax?
I'm sorry, can you reiterate your question?
So in your budget proposal, we have an estimate of visitors arrival at 268,000, and that goes for Japan, Korea, China, and others. I'm assuming that's the U.S. and Guam. But when you go to the next page, I think this is the budget that was submitted to OMB. The projection of your hotel occupancy is at 10.3, but the numbers didn't add up. Where it's half the tourists, half of the visitors is cut in half, but then the projection for the hotel tax didn't budge by that much. It pretty much stayed the same, and I can't. We're looking at maybe it's actually an increase from FYI 20 by close to $200,000. So it's not adding up. I guess my question is, if the visitors are going down, it should reflect the projection for the hotel tax. It should also go down, a downward trend. Let's go. Wait, go on recess. Chair, recess real quick. Can you?
We'll just take a 5-minute quick recess to give you time to look through that.
Why?
5 minutes.
Secretary, it's the submittal to the legislature, the revised budget. I guess MVA submitted their package and it just inserted into our budget proposal under the programs. Yeah, so the number didn't add up when it falls by half.
Uh, Director Iakopo, you agree we can come back to that?
You want to come back to it, or
We can come back to that and rise back.
but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Okay. So members, we come back from recess. We're back from recess. We will give ample time for the team from MVA to look at the question from Rep. Yumu. Rep. Yumu still have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. And I guess we did clarify with the numbers of MVA. So can we get a response on as to how the 10.3 projected hotel occupancy tax is still in effect when the number of tourists entering the CNMI is will be falling by a half. So can we get a response?
So on page 17 of our budget submission, for FY20, the number that came out to 9.8 was due to a 28% reduction on March of 2020. And then for FY 2021, assuming that flights will or arrivals will increase, we actually added 5% additional.
Okay, so I just want to make sure the number correspond each other. So we're not over budgeting, and then if it doesn't happen, then we're gonna be back to where we start. Where the Department of Finance would transfer the same amount for next fiscal year, knowing the fact that we're not sure if Skymark is going to return. You mentioned they suspended their flights until September, so there is still a chance they might reinstate the flights. We're not sure yet. So I just want to make sure the budget that sets forth on the hotel tax is correct, because on your submittal, let me just scroll up. On the programs, the promotional, marketing and promotional at 6.5 million, we want to make sure that is that all these programs still in effect, like for example the Christmas in the Marianas and so on in the list. We want to make sure that we at least cover those promotions. So that's why I'm actually saying that the 10.3 is actually too high, and it should be reflective of what you're going to spend this fiscal year or next fiscal year. So I guess I'll restate is the programs that is listed in the booklet for advertising events and promotional marketing and promotional still. Is there other items that would be affected where we're going to cancel some of it because we're not sure?
Yes, that's correct. So this budget we see it as like a working budget, right? It's based on actual arrivals. And so each quarter, we always seek projections, so that way we can plan out our budget. So for example, if Christmas in the Marianas is not to continue due to the pandemic, we wouldn't utilize those funds. Rather, we would ask our board if we can reprogram these funds for other uses.
Okay. Chair, are you for now?
Thank you, Rep. Yumo. Do we have members? Rep. Sablan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to MVA. Would you mind introducing your team?
So to my right, I have Joanne. She is our chief accountant. To my left is Judy Torres, deputy managing director. I have Tatiana Babauta, Manager for Product Development, our Human Resource Manager, Carol Chargaloff, and our Tour Guide Manager, Kunhi Han.
Okay, thank you so much. So no board members in the gallery today.
Unfortunately, on behalf of them, I apologize they weren't able to make it.
No problem. Thank you. And welcome to you and your team. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, also for being here. My first question is actually for you, Secretary Atalig. What was the basis for choosing 2011 for your projections for the HOT this coming year?
Good question. We used the 2011 year as a model before the casino industry and before the uptick in tourism. That was like the last year. 11 and 12 was the years prior to the uptick in our economy. So we're looking at the current numbers, current fiscal year, with the drop of tourism. If we didn't have a pretty good first quarter, we would be looking at levels way below 100 million. So we use that as a basis for projecting, not knowing and not having any real indicators to project or to even be as optimistic to project higher. So we used that that level. That was the lowest recorded year for tourism and hot collections going back 10 years. And so we felt confident or comfortable using that as a basis. We adjusted for inflation using CPI index, and then looked at the different other revenue sources and incorporated all that in coming up with our full total revenue projection of 144. Keep in mind not just in hotel occupancy tax, but there's a lot of multiplier indexes arriving from tourist numbers. We're seeing that just the local economy will not sustain the levels of the last 3 or 4 years because of those multiplier effects. Those other businesses that deal with tourists is not open, and so we're not seeing any BGRs from that. So we had to go back to find a good year that kind of indicates the current status we're in, and that was the best year to look at.
Okay. And as I recall from the Fiscal Response Summit, it was also assumed during those discussions that we would see like a permanent loss in Chinese tourism of about 30%. Was that also taken into account in the administration's projections?
Actually, the summit, the Fiscal Reform Summit preliminary work did not have the full information we had when we decided to review our revenue projections again. And at that time, we were expecting a 30% drop in the Chinese market as we saw the trends just from the different challenges that we're facing in that industry or in that region. However, the new revenue projections does not account for that. It accounts for a 80% drop in tourist arrivals and looking at a 20% kind of a projection. We had to pick a number and kind of double our current status right now at 1%. Single digit occupancy right now versus looking at a 20% projection or 20% of the current numbers.
Okay.
A lot of this, obviously, we're reviewing our revenues. We're starting to see the drop of the real effects of our COVID-19 last month and this month. We're hoping it bounces uptick a little bit based on the federal resources that's been coming into the island. And we're hoping that will go through for the first quarter of the fiscal year, and in hopes that We are open back up in the new normal, and we can see some arrivals coming in, but we don't see the numbers close to the numbers within the last 3 to 4 years.
Okay. So there just seems to be a significant discrepancy between the administration's numbers and projections and MVA's. And I guess my next question is for Director Iakopo. What accounts for MVA's confidence that tourism arrivals will be so much better than what the administration perceives?
That's kind of a difficult question to answer because, you know, this pandemic is a first for everyone, right? And we just really can't tell without a vaccine. We just really can't tell when airlines are going to resume. But for now, what MVA can do is continue to provide virtual experiences. So that way, these arrival numbers will, we hope that they will be what it is or even more.
I see. Okay, so in terms of the overall financial picture at MVA at this time, you have reported that MVA has had to furlough staff. You have had to suspend merit increases and WGIs. You've frozen hiring. You're not paying overtime. You've had difficulties with untimely transfers, and according to the Secretary, the general fund owes MVA something like $13 million from last year and this year?
We owe, as of June 30, 8.7 million. Total resources, if we include FY21 projection, is 13.4 million available for MVA.
I see. Okay, so 8.7 million total as of June 30, but inclusive of the amount that's owed from last fiscal year, or no? Okay, all right. So these are pretty dire conditions, and the question that I have now is how did MVA find the funds for this deer meat for dinner trip to the Northern Islands?
The funds that was used for the deer meat, we had actually sought the governor's support and Secretary of Finance to provide this promotional activity.
So did the funds come from the general fund or from MVA?
I transferred money to MVA using what we owe in hotel occupancy tax. They did put in a request to the governor's office for assistance for this program. It wasn't identified as exactly what funding source it would be, but I booked it to the hotel occupancy tax I owe them.
And how much was booked then for this?
I transferred 60,000.
60,000.
Or 59.9.
59,000. Okay. And I'm curious, how long was that trip planned, and how did this come to be an MVA project?
So this promotional was, it was an opportunity for MVA, and it's what we did was it's similar to our media fam trips like we usually do. And so when the opportunity came to promote the Northern Islands, MVA has always been, how do I say this, an advocate for ecotourism, right? And what more better time than now that we continue to share, not only we promote Saipan, Tinian, and Rota, but our Northern Islands as well.
But how did the opportunity come? Who proposed the project?
The Office of the Governor.
The Office of the Governor. Okay, so this wasn't something that had been in the works at MVA. It doesn't appear in your report. It doesn't appear in previous plans. So it was just proposed by the governor, and MVA agreed to fund it. Is that how that worked?
Yes.
Okay. And what exactly did those funds cover?
We covered the charter boats, fuel, meals, and materials.
Okay. How many boats?
Just one.
And was the introduction of deer part of the contract?
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Mr. Arrington was shown with the governor introducing deer to Pagan. Was that part of the contract?
No. Deer?
Yes.
No, the way it was introduced was it's an equal tourism opportunity.
Okay. Would you please provide a copy of the contract? Who is it with?
For the contract of
Yes.
the 59,000,
Mhm.
it's with us.
No, I'm sorry, but who is,
Oh.
that's between MVA and who?
So what had happened was when we had requested for additional funds to provide this, we had purchased it without a contract.
Okay. I'm sorry, how does that work? So you don't have a contract with Mr. Arrington?
No,
or
it
Dear
was
Meat
just for the
Dinner?
procurement of the charter, the meals, and yes.
I see. Okay. Okay. Well, would you be able to provide this committee with those records?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And for Mr. Secretary Atalig, what was the total cost of that trip to the CNMI government? Because there were more than just 2 government boats. There were additional government personnel that went on this trip. There was lots of fuel that was needed for all these multiple boats and supplies and equipment. We all saw the pictures. Do you have an estimate at least of how much this trip cost?
Thanks, Rep. Sablan. The only amounts that I transferred was 59,000 to MVA. I am aware of a couple POs for the Northern Mariana Island mayor that that requested for fuel and payment for a charter to go up, and that's coming out of the Northern Island mayor's account. I'm aware that DPS submitted a couple requisitions for fuel. I believe $6,000 in fuel. That's what I'm aware of. Any other cost to other charters, I'm not aware of.
Or overtime for personnel?
I have not seen anything in that sense yet.
Okay, thank you. My last question is, so in light of MVA's very pressing financial difficulties, and your financial statements show that MVA is actually overrunning its account by $2.5 million, at least as of April 30. It has been reported that the MVA board approved a raise for you, Ms. Iakopo, at the last board meeting. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. However, it has not begun.
When
I
does
haven't taken the race yet.
Okay, when does that begin then?
We're still processing the contract.
I see. And may I ask, what was the amount approved, and did anyone else at MVA receive raises?
No, not anyone else received any raises. It was an additional raise of $5,000.
Okay. And I realize that there are no board members here to answer this question, but how was that justified in light of more than half of your staff being furloughed and cut, and no one else getting any increases, and tourism being down at unprecedented levels? How is that justified?
I'm sorry, Congresswoman, I can't answer that. We have scheduled to meet with our chair for an evaluation process.
I see. I have no further questions.
Just for clarification, follow up with Rep. Tina Sablan's questions. Just saw a news article that there's $100,000 also. Is that related to MVA, or just clarification if what we read was wrong, or because I'm hearing that there was only 59,000 that was allocated for the promotion?
The 100,000. So, like I mentioned earlier, our budget is a working budget, and so what we had proposed to our board was the 100,000 was to remove out of our budget of destination enhancement. However, it was a board decision to put it back so that way we can use that 100,000 for repairs and for our tourist sites.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Members, further questions? For the first round, okay. Rep. Camacho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Iakopo, welcome and your team. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your presence here this afternoon. I just want to see if you can just further elaborate on the agreement that you guys have with Skymark. So it would take them 23 charter flights, right, to the CNMI in order for them to avail to the incentive. 23. And how many times have they flown so far?
So these are regular flights, not chartered.
Regular. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so how many times have they flown to the CNMI so far since that agreement was made?
They began last year, November was their first inaugural flight, and then they had suspended flights, I believe, in April. So from May to today, we have not remitted because they have not flown here.
So, sorry, is there a specific number that 3 flights, 5 flights total so far? I mean,
So
23 flights a month.
23. They in order to avail for the 150, they have to fly at least 23 times.
A month.
23 flights in a month.
Okay, so is there any plans for MVA in terms of really upping the tourist advertisement when we do reopen our economy with Japan and Korea? Because with reading the news and all the controversy with the U.S. and China relations, there's a big uncertainty with the China market. So is there any plans where MVA is planning to redivert some of their advertising funds to better advertise Japan and Korea?
If we had the money, we would. Actually, as of right now, what we have been doing is just providing virtual experiences because the last thing we want is out of sight, out of mind. And so if we had the money, we would definitely use that at full force to promote.
Thank you, Ms. Iakopo. And my last question is to Mr. Secretary. How soon do you think Finance will be able to remit is it 8 million?
Yes, to date, total payables to MVA is 8.7 million. That's inclusive of 3 million to date, of this fiscal year, and 5.6 million last fiscal year. To answer your question, as funds are available, we are transferring to MVA. And so I mentioned earlier the last transfer was about 3 weeks ago for 300,000, and I expect to do the same this week.
In the amount of 300,000 as well?
Yes, at least. If more funds are available, I will remit more.
And we are expecting, sorry if I forget the number you mentioned from FEMA as a result of the quarantine sites, right?
The amount that we're receiving from FEMA is still, there's 14 million or 13 million that is in the final stages of approval for receiving the reimbursements, and that's within the next 2 to 3 weeks probably. That's about 13 some million reimbursed to the general fund.
That's great news. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. Rep. Castro, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Madam Director, and to the staff of MVA. I know that this is something that we're all still trying to get used to. So I know, we're all trying to make the best of the situation given to us. I think I probably might have missed it a couple questions ago, but I wanted to kind of gauge your thoughts in regards to the signature events that usually MVA puts together. And I know there's several. In personal capacity, I've kind of been involved in a few of them. But I wanted to ask, because I know that ever since the pandemic broke out and it's affected us, I know that several of the signature events usually hold, like Taste of the Marianas, even the festival runs all got compromised. Looking into 2021, how does the how are you forecasting those events to be affected? Because I know, like in a situation as sometimes that's the biggest economic booster for some islands' economies, like say Pika Fest or the triathlons in Rota, the fishing derbies in the other islands. So how does your team look in regards to whether those events will continue or whether there'll be modifications down the line?
As of now, there will be modifications. We have obliged to the COVID-19 task force with the preventative measures that they have in place. But what we are focusing on more is to bring back the airlines. And so once the airlines are able to restore, then these signature events can continue. Again, we are not at the new 100% normalcy, so we have to comply with those measures.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Director. I mean, I know definitely we definitely need the flights coming in. Of course, without the tourists, the revenue doesn't come in. Has your team thought about trying to capitalize on possibly like offering like incentives in regards to like staycations and here and there? I remember one time during there was one year where MVA's marketing campaign was "Get Away Without Going Away," which means trying to capitalize on having residents take advantage of certain 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 things that we usually market to the tourists, but market it to a point where the locals can capitalize on it. Have you yeah so have has MVA been contemplating or capitalizing on a idea like that?
We have been in discussions with our MVA members. I think the goal for now is because we don't have any tourists, we want to improve on our tourist sites. And so our direction has kind of shifted over to repairing them, because these tourist sites is what makes us unique. It's what drives the tourists to come here and visit. And then from there, we can work our way down. But I just do wanted to share that prior to the pandemic, we've actually been working with our neighboring islands of Guam as well to provide staycations. Unfortunately, because of the airlines and with the growing numbers, that was put on hold.
Okay, thank you. And I know you mentioned in the first question I asked about ensuring that there's safety for the visitors that do visit the islands in the event that the economy gets reopened again. I know in one of the directives, one of the directives of the EO, it indicated about certain places opening, or like hotels opening, where if they were able to provide like thermal monitoring. I wanted to ask because like the grotto gets a lot of traffic. Right now it's closed. The sites on the north, and certain places in different places of the CNMI do get a lot of tourist traffic. So in the event that comes about, where we're at level green, or things improve to the point where we can allow these sites to be open, they get a lot of visitors. Is MVA does MVA have plans in regards to implementing those types of measures at the sites once we get to some degree of normalcy?
Yes, and we are constantly also working with the COVID-19 task force, because we seek their guidance and their expertise as they are the health experts. And so, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Director. I yield for this round, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Rep. Castro. For the first round out of 10 rounds. Rep. Banglonia, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon and welcome, Director. My question is just pertaining to the new press release regarding visitors or regarding returning residents or non-residents, and how MVA plans to promote the CNMI when, for example, a non-resident would have to come in and pay at their own expense $400 per night to get quarantined. So how do you plan to promote CNMI when there's that added cost in just having to quarantine before going out into the community and exploring the islands?
We have had several discussions with our airline partners in regards to that. And it's whether it's incentives to provide the airlines to reduce or to cover these costs for the tourists, or if airlines are also willing to lower down their cost. So it's an ongoing discussion. What the press release entails is that, you know, the Marianas is here. We have taken preventative measures, and that we want to continue to welcome them.
But so now you would have to say that your target would be high-end customers, because you're talking about $400 per night, and there's a 5-day minimum quarantine, and that's a $2,000 expense without even having to visit the islands yet. And so, you know, how are you working with the task force in addressing that if the airlines can't accommodate that request, and just having to fill their planes or even get customers on board in order to fly over? You know, there's only so much the airlines can do, but what is MVA doing with the task force or with the governor's office in trying to either reduce that cost of $400 a night, or find some kind of waiver, or offer some suggestions to the task force in terms of how we deal with non-residents that are here as a tourist, as opposed to contract workers or anything like that?
Yes, we've had several discussions, and we've actually also provided them recommendations. But I think at the end of the day, safety is a priority. Our health and safety is a priority. And I respect the decisions that they have made.
Are you for now, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Manglonia. We'll move on to our second round. Rep. Lipan, start us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I was looking at your operation budget, and I came across this office rental. Is the landlord increasing your rental?
No, actually, our lease ends next year, April. And so at this point, MVA is looking for a permanent home. We've actually sought assistance through the Office of the Governor to see if they're able to provide us buildings for MVA.
So in the event that your movement has yet to materialize, you're requesting a 64,000 for office rental. You're adding 10,000 out of the 54. I don't know if this is an error, or because if the landlord is increasing, I don't think the landlord is compassionate enough to understand our current situation. Can you elaborate more, because I'm not hearing what I'm supposed to be hearing?
Okay, so right now our landlord leased the property, right? And their 40-year lease ends next year. And so the reason, this was an assumption that we will continue to rent, and we wanted to add additional costs just in case rental goes up with the new landlord.
So the current landlord or the leasehold of that property is not NMD. It will revert back to the original owner.
Correct.
Have any discussion with the original owner with MVA?
We've tried, however, the original owners consist of 13, and not all of them are here on the island.
Uh, you know, FY 2021 is just next door, and for MVA to pack up and move to a building, is there any, are you already in that mode of and meeting or seeking the administration assistance to find you a location?
Correct. We've actually had discussions, and there are potentials. And so right now, we've actually asked for the Capitol Hill buildings over there, right across, if they can allocate at least 2, but we're asking for 3 due to the size of MVA and including our storage of supplies for our signature events. Actually, this week we were going to do a site assessment to see if those buildings are potential homes for MVA.
Director, I don't think that moving to Capitol Hill would address MVA. I mean, MVA should be down there at the Western District where the tourist industry is. With all those buildings being vacant, I think it's more appropriate to negotiate with and do your grocery shopping down there to find a building. I mean, some of those owners or leasehold are trying to figure out who wants to lease a building. I think you should be searching there at Paseo. There, it's a ghost town. There's empty building there that the MVA can probably reach out to whoever has least interest on that. I think Capitol Hill is not a suitable location. I know that you're trying to find where there's no money involved, but how would tourists be able to drive all the way up here in the event we open to find MVA? I don't think it's feasible for that aspect. I highly recommend that you send your staff to find a building down there where it's more, acceptable for our tourists when we open up. I think you should revisit that. The other thing, most of your event, that the events that are scheduled on a month-to-month basis are canceled. I'm seeing that you have, for Saipan alone, you have over almost 380,000 on projected for all this actual event. What did you use this money for? Or is this money still there? Or is there any plan to use this money on those events that are canceled?
Sorry, are you referring to FY 20 or 21?
20.
20, okay. To answer your question, the funds are not there in the bank. And with this pandemic, we have not had any events, and we actually don't foresee the events in the near future. For September, which is the International Festival of Cultures, we are just not sure because we don't know what the results will be, whether we'll have the flights come back after, July 31st with Korea Airlines. It's just going to have to be on a case-to-case basis.
So you're saying that this projection that you did for 2020, you never received any of this money. However, the last marathon, which is the Saipan Marathon, you exhausted what? How much of that did you exhausted? There should be a balance of that and what was it used for. I know it was not a big event. Kind of curious because knowing MVA, when you see that your hard money, you're already projecting all these activities and you plug in those numbers, dollar amount, and I'm basing it on your submission here because I'm kind of concerned of how this money is going to be used if and when, if finance would continue to remit to MVA.
So regarding the Saipan Marathon, we actually did exhaust that funding, and we were able to utilize a bit more from the registrations that we received, the registration fees that we received, and the expenditures for Saipan Marathon, not only went to our shirts and our medals, but it also went to our banquets and certificates and such.
So you exhausted the entire amount of 70,000?
Correct.
I'm seeing an audit for FY19 of 45,000. Back then, there was no pandemic. I'm figuring that we had a huge number of participants. This year with the pandemic, you exhausted 70,000. I'm kind of lost in this this projection itself.
The difference that you see there is because this Saipan Marathon, we actually had less sponsorships. So we didn't receive as much money, which is why we had to expend a little bit more.
I guess, Director, you're projecting again for the next fiscal year. As I told the governor, we should be preparing and concentrating in addressing what other activities should we have here in the CNMI, in all the respective senatorial district, put money into it. I think that, putting numbers on all this event right now is pretty much premature. You have X amount of millions of dollars that's forthcoming, as the Secretary of Finance alluded, that you can plug in the future. You must maximize this funds in areas to improve. As discussed in the Economic Council, that if we really need to bring in quality tourists, now's the time to start planning, and the money should be spent in planning, because a lot of our facilities are dilapidated, and this is going to bring me to Calavera Cave. I went there the other day. It's deplorable, Director. I've addressed this with you to send somebody over there to either fix the staging area, because it's not safe. Currently, the structure is damaged. Is there any plans for you guys to shut that down? Because even if our local people would venture there, and for any apparent reason their safety is compromised, MVA is going to be liable for that, because they're the caretaker of that facility. And I'm worried of my findings. I want money spent on that. Let's improve that. If we're trying to improve the destination, that Calavera Cave is an ideal destination to showcase. But at the current stage, It's not safe. You look at the Grotto lookout, that's another area that's I'm concerned about. You know, we need to use this money to improve those sites because we can't just wait to the last minute. And when we do open up internationally and tourists start flocking into the CNMI, is that what we're going to show? I highly recommend that you take lead and request the board for you to spend money on those projects to improve the facility, because you know the Secretary of Finance is so gifted in giving you back your money, and now that we know the numbers, certainly I will be looking into it and ask you daily or weekly or quarterly how much has been reverted or remitted to your office. So I hope that you will reconsider. I'll yield for this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Lipan. Rep. Camacho.
This is a very short statement, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. As you know, I have been taking a very proactive and aggressive approach in beautification, especially in the northern side, and now we're spreading our efforts here around the Capitol Hill area. So I just wanted to offer my help. If you ever need anything, I'm willing to contribute my time to volunteer, so just give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. Members, further? Rep. Manglonia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the list that Chairman Lifan brought up in regards to the activities or the promotional activities that you have planned out. You know, and then after Rep. Sablan bringing up this $59,000 that was spent, why is it that year after year you continue to promote ROTA at a budget of around $20,000 compared to TINEM, which is around $50,000 on average each year, yet you know you're not utilizing ROTA or promoting ROTA enough? And to add on to that question, what are you doing to try to promote other activities on ROTA? I mean, we can advertise ROTA as an eco-friendly or as an ecotourism destination. So my question is, why hasn't enough been done to promote ROTA?
We have been working with the mayor's office, Mayor Atalig in Rota, in trying to come up with innovative ways to promote the island of Rota. I do respect your suggestion as far as ecotourism, because it is a natural treasure that we do have. I will work with my team in regards to enhancing the island of Rota a little bit more.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Manglonia. Members, further? Rep. Tina Sablan.
Just a follow-up request for the Secretary of Finance. Would you please provide this committee with those records that you mentioned having, the additional requisitions, the purchase orders for fuel, and then the charter boat contracts, or whatever the documents are that you mentioned with respect to this Northern Islands trip? And if you do get any overtime requests, that as well. Do you have an estimate at this point for how much it all costs besides the $59,000 that you transferred to?
No, I don't.
No. Okay. Thank you.
You yield, Rep. Sablan?
Yes, I apologize. I yield.
No problem. Further, members, closing? Okay, Rep. Peter for the first and the second.
I'll take the last.
I know you missed out on the first, so
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director, for being here, with you and your team. Actually, I just heard some of the suggestions that some of our colleagues are presenting to you to promote, right? Especially with Chairman LJ with the stay, you know, on island vacation. I mean, just another recommendation that marketing to the U.S. would be another option. Maybe you can send your marketing team to whether it be a Hawaii or because there's still a lot of folks flying to Hawaii. And speaking of Hawaii, with regards to the quarantine, they still have to do a 14-day whether they're a tourist before they take their vacation. So having a 5-day stay here, even at $400, basically it's like a $2,000 quarantine before you start your vacation. Nothing compared to what Hawaii's doing. They're also trying to figure out ways how to get around the 14-day for the tourists. So that could be something you want to take a look at under our U.S. jurisdiction. So just another recommendation. I mean, most of our Asian lines are pretty out right now. We're not getting any flights from there other than the United flights, right? And also with the FEMA support. So consider looking at also our U.S. markets to come out to the U.S. territories. That's all, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Peter. Further? Floor Leader Sablan.
Thank you, Chairman. Director, you mentioned earlier that the MVA Saipan office will expire on April 2021, and that you have been working with the administration on trying to locate an area, and also you have open discussions with Department of Public Lands and CNMI Museum, as you have stated here in your summary and financial highlights. How are you going about with that? Have they identified any particular place, or that's still an open discussion as we speak as of now?
Regarding working with Department of Public Lands, they've actually given us several locations and gave us options if we wanted to take over in those properties. There's no current buildings in the listing that they provided us. And due to no funding, we don't have the funds to actually build from ground up. Regarding the museum, I've actually talked to the director there, and actually at this point, it's an HPO matter, and I believe it's because of the zone.
Okay. And so MVA hasn't set aside any funding for such proposed construction of a new building?
Actually, for several years, the MVA has been reserving funds for our building fund. It's just unfortunate that due to funding, we had to utilize our reserve building fund to pay for our payroll, for that matter.
How much is this reserve at the most ever?
So it started at 1.9, and to date it's a balance of 500,000.
Okay, thank you for that response. Another question. I know that you have furloughed a majority of your staff because of funding and of this COVID pandemic and funding resources, but your contracts with Parks and Recs, with the maintaining of the historical grounds all over our island, are that still intact? Are they still maintaining our historical areas like command posts with regards with your partnership with Parks and Rec?
Yes, that funding is given to them for fuel and supplies to maintain the sites.
That's still ongoing?
Correct.
All right, thank you, Director. I yield for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Floor. Rep. Yumo.
Thank you, Chair. And just a comment because, and I think that's why there was confusion earlier today. I just noticed that the board and the submittal of the budget was since March 12th, and I didn't notice the date, but when we did mention earlier about the number, it didn't add up. Maybe if the board resubmit the close enough projection Otherwise, everything here, it's really it's pre COVID-19. And this was signed or approved by the board since March 12. We shut down the CNMI government on the 15th, I believe, or 16. So maybe just so that we're up to date with what's going on with MVA, and I'm not sure why this was actually still submitted into the revised budget, and there should be changes in the projections and the numbers close enough so that we can better understand and you know, we with the $13 million that's still owed to the MVA, at least we can, you know, what Chairman Lee was mentioning earlier, we'll be following up and ensuring, because if we don't promote, no one's going to come back. We understand it's going to take at least till early next year to have some kind of accurate numbers of how the travelers would start adjusting from the future. So maybe you know, if we can resubmit the correct amount, and then we can have it for the record. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Yumo. Members, I believe we've completed the second round. Can we take two more before we close for the day? Okay, there being none, please allow me to ask just a few more questions and then we close. Madam Iakopo, there is a tour guide certification, your proposed budget for $25,000, the governor's budget for $11,000. I know Ms. Quinn worked hard on the bill we have passed for the tour guide certification. My understanding is for the tour guides to be paying a fee to MVA. Am I correct or am I mistaken? Paying MVA for the tour classes in order for them to qualify. I'm confused because I'm seeing the budget that looks like we're paying out money for MVA. So just to clarify.
The money that is paid for the training goes straight to NMC. It is not paid to us. The only fee that we collect is for certification, and it's $50 for a 3-year certification. And they actually pay a renewal fee. For this year, there was a public service announcement saying that we are extending the duration of the badge for 6 months because they actually had no business, and in consideration of the suffering they had economically. So all those fees were waived, and right now I think we had about 50 tour guides come in to renew. So yeah, we actually make almost no money, very little. And whatever money that we have collected, I have tried to well, we haven't been able to implement it yet, but give it back to the tour guides by creating some program, an award program. So it's not giving back to MVA, but just giving back to the tour guides so that we could find different programs for it.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn. My next question is, first of all, the HUD and the container tax, whoever came up with those ideas are a genius in my book. Are there other revenue stream ideas that MVA is considering for the near future or for the long-term future?
To add into that, we actually have our MVA membership, and that's for $100 a year per member.
I asked that question because there was somebody I think brought up an idea where arrivals, tourists will be paying an environmental fee into the economy. I don't know if that will work, but something to entertain. The environmental impact fee. I know the FAA does not allow taxing, but we can take tax hits or legs. I'm not sure. When do we expect to open up our tourist arrivals? Any idea?
Actually, as of we have been having discussions with Asiana Airlines, and what they're proposing is it's like a trial to see how many flights will be sold. And our discussions was that it was going to be at least 8 flights to begin with, beginning mid-August. But again, with the measures in place, really right now for returning tourists, for them to have to go through 14-day quarantine, it's very, very difficult. So that's the challenge that we are facing right now.
That concludes my questions. May I invite you for any closing remarks you or your team would like to share with us? The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you again for hearing us out. What I ask is for your continued support, and if there's any recommendations that you guys have for MVA, please, we welcome you all. We ask you for continued support and funding in providing us funds so that way we can promote our destination, and not just for the islands of Tinian, Rota, and Saipan, but for Northern Islands as well. Tourism is our economic driver, and as I mentioned, earlier, without tourism, we don't have an economy and we don't have jobs for our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Iakopo. You have a very, very tough job, and I know it's not your doing, it's because of the pandemic. You will have our support, however, and whenever we can help. I'd like to thank you and your team members. Please extend the same to your board members. And I'd like to also thank, on behalf of the members, our Secretary of Finance for joining us. Members, we have 10 o'clock tomorrow, another hearing. So this concludes our hearing. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.